Good morning, all of you. So, today we are going to start your third chapter, that is nationalism in India. So, up till now, you have read about rise of nationalism in Europe. You read how there were various European countries who converted or declared themselves independent. Okay, now today we'll be reading about nationalism in India. You all know that India was ruled by many European powers like British, Dutch, French, Portuguese. Okay, so it was very, very necessary to make India free from those rule. And for that, it was very important for people to have a common identity, and that was termed as nationalism. People should feel for their country, they should have patriotic feeling towards their country. So there were various instances, various incidences, various movements that took place. There were many leaders from moderates to extremists who made tremendous efforts for giving this awareness to the people, for making people feel that India is their country and other people are the foreigners who are ruling us. So we need to be free from them. So we'll start with your third chapter, nationalism in India. As you have seen, modern nationalism in Europe came to be associated with formation of nation states. It also means a change in people's understanding of who they were and what defined their identity and sense of belonging. So, if you talk about Europe, if you remember in class 9th, you have read about the French Revolution. There, they were given certain names like La Petra, Citoyen. Okay, La Petra means you all belong to the same fatherland. Les Citoyen, that means you all are the citizen of the same fatherland. So these common terms or common identities were used. So basically this defines your identity and which gives you a sense of belongings. You have you have a very nostalgic feeling towards your country. You feel that India is my country and I am the one who is responsible for its happiness. Okay, and I maybe not much, but even I can do my bit. New symbols and coins, new songs and ideas forged new links and redefined the boundaries of the community. In most countries, the making of new national identity was a long process. How did this consciousness emerge in India? So, new songs were given, new symbols were given, new flags were introduced. But, in most of the countries, it took lots of time. Like if you talk about in India, the first war of independence was in 1857. That was called as Sepoy Mutiny. And later it took number of years. Imagine from 1857, we got independent in 1947. So it took almost 90 years of struggle to gain independence. And it was before 1857 also people were fighting, but it was not a mass revolt. Okay. So, it took lots of time for people to have this feeling of nationalism. So, basically, in this chapter, we are going to read how did it start in India. In India, as in Vietnam and many other colonies, the growth of modern nationalism is intimately connected to anti-colonial movement. Okay, so modernization, if you talk about India, Vietnam and other colonies like India, colonies are basically the parts or the countries that were under the control of a supreme authority, any European power. So, the growth of modern nationalism intimately it is very closely connected to anti-colonialism. When modernization started, when modern nationalism started, when people started feeling for their nation, gradually what happened was they started thinking for freedom. So it was very closely related to anti-colonial movement. People began discovering their unity in the process of their struggle with colonialism. So they started discovering their unity. They started finding reasons to unite. That means this movement was not of one person, of an individual or a group of people. Rather, they started seeing this movement as a collective force for the entire nation. Okay. Now, the sense of being oppressed under the colonialism provided a share bond that tied many different groups together. So, since everybody, it is said that enemy, a common enemy, if you have a common enemy, you all become friends. So same happened. There were many European powers who were ruling the small places, and just because they all were under the colonial rule, the colonial countries, they started coming together. They came close together and they started forming their own united group. But each class and group felt the effect of colonialism differently. Their experience were varied and their notion of freedom were also not always the same. So, but each group, if you talk about your country or if you talk about people in your class, when I say freedom, some of you mean that some freedom means that you should be able to, or you should be allowed to go have late night parties. If some means that you should be provided with equality as your brothers in the house. Okay, so हर लोगों की अपनी एक perception होती है freedom की. So at that time also people or the countrymen, everybody had their own perception of freedom and they had their own set of ideas. ऐसा नहीं था कि जिस तरह की freedom इंडिया चाह रहा था वैसी ही freedom बाकी देशों में भी लोग डिमांड कर रहे थे. It was not so. The Congress under Mahatma Gandhi tried to force these ideas together within one movement, but the unity did not emerge without conflict. So Mahatma Gandhi, who was heading the Congress at that time, wanted to bring people together. So, but always remember, जब बहुत सारे लोग एक साथ होंगे, that will definitely bring some or the other conflict. Okay. In an early textbook, you have read about the growth of nationalism in India up to the first decade of 20th century. In this chapter, you'll pick up the stories from 1920s and start the non-cooperation civil disobedience movement. We will explore how Congress sought to develop the national movement, how different social groups participated in the movement, and how nationalism captured the imagination of people. So up till now you have read before 1920 what happened at Champaran Satyagraha, Kheda Satyagraha, these Ahmedabad Satyagraha, these all you have read. Okay, now you'll be reading from 1920. ये उस समय की बात है जब महात्मा गांधी already India आ चुके हैं. Now he has come to India and from 1920, that is from the non-cooperation, civil disobedience, from here you'll be reading because beyond that you have already read. So these basically these things what they'll show you कितनी कांग्रेस की एफर्ट थी मोबिलाइज करने में लोगों को एक साथ लाने में. ठीक है, बट ऑलवेज रिमेंबर जितने वैरायटी ऑफ लोग आएंगे अपने एक वैरायटी ऑफ थॉट्स के साथ आएंगे. लाइक इफ यू टॉक अबाउट महात्मा गांधी, ही बिलीव्ड इन नॉन वायलेंस, वेयर एज इफ यू टॉक अबाउट भगत सिंह, ही बिलीव्ड इन वायलेंस. ओके, सो पीपल एंड परसेप्शन वैरीज. एक पर्सन से दूसरे पर्सन की परसेप्शन वैरी करेगी. नाउ सी दिस picture. This picture, figure 1, 6th April 1919. Mass procession on the street became a common feature during the national movement. अगर आप देखेंगे तो ये 6th April 1919 की सीन है. If you remember, a very, very famous incident, or you can say an accident took place. ओके, एक बहुत ही खराब, बहुत ही नेगेटिव इंसिडेंस इंडिया में हुई थी बहुत ही थोड़े दिनों के बाद. 6 अप्रैल यहाँ दी हुई है. 13 अप्रैल 1919 को your Jallianwala Bagh incidents took place, where people were ruthlessly killed. They were not allowed to move out of the Jallianwala Bagh. At Jallianwala Bagh, people had assembled to celebrate Baisakhi. Some had assembled for peaceful meeting. But what did General Dyer and General O'Dyer, they both did was, yes, one more thing that most of you must not be knowing. General Dyer दो थे. ठीक है, इस जालियांवाला बाग में ही दो जनरल डायर थे. General Dyer and General O'Dyer. Okay, so General Dyer, he ordered his troops कि आप exit gate को block कर दीजिए, और he ordered them to open fire on the people. Unarmed people, they had no way to protect themselves. वो क्या करने लगे, कुछ तो boundaries jump करने की कोशिश करने लगे, which boundary walls were very high, next to impossible to escape, and some started jumping into the well. ऐसा believe किया जाता है कि वहाँ एक well थी, उसमें लोग अपनी लाइफ को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए उसमें जंप करने लगे. एंड इतनी ज्यादा लोग उसमें जंप किए थे, इतने ज्यादा लोग मरे थे कि वो जो पूरी वेल थी वो ऑलमोस्ट फुल हो गई थी डेड बॉडी से. सो जस्ट इमेजिन द सीन एट दैट टाइम. अगर आप आज भी जालियांवाला बाग में अमृतसर में जाएंगे तो वो बुलेट्स जो हैं अभी भी उस जालियांवाला बाग के वॉल्स में अभी भी वो बुलेट्स प्रिजर्व करके रखे गए हैं. दिस रिमाइंड्स ऑफ द क्रूएलिटी दैट ब्रिटिशर्स डिड टू इंडियंस. ओके, सो Now you must be wondering that 6th April को लोग दिख रहे हैं ऐसे पिक्चर में, इतने सारे लोग दिख रहे हैं, फिर लोगों ने क्यों क्या ऐसा हुआ होगा द 13 अप्रैल को ब्रिटिशर्स ने ऐसा नेगेटिव मूव लिया? आई टेल यू व्हाई, बिकॉज ब्रिटिश बाय दिस टाइम दे स्टार्टेड फियरिंग दैट जैसे इंडियन की यूनिटी बढ़ रही है, अगर आप देखेंगे तो आपको लोग ही लोग दिखेंगे, दूर दूर तक केवल लोग दिखेंगे, घरों घरों में, छतों पे केवल लोग दिख रहे हैं. दैट मीन्स एवरीबडी स्टार्टेड सीइंग इंडिया एज देयर ओन कंट्री. अर्लियर ब्रिटिशर्स बिलीव्ड इन द पॉलिसी ऑफ डिवाइड एंड रूल. वो पहले डिवाइड एंड रूल की पॉलिसी पे बिलीव करते थे. दे फेल्ट दैट लोगों को डिवाइड करो, लोगों को, जमींदार्स को पावर दे दो, वो ऑटोमेटिकली पीजेंट्स को टॉर्चर करने लगेंगे. बट नाउ बाय 1919 सारे लोगों के पास बहुत क्लियर हो चुकी थी दैट ब्रिटिशर्स वर नॉट वन हु वर थिंकिंग अबाउट गुड फॉर एनीबडी. ओके, नाउ लेट अस सी दिस. The first World War, Khilafat and non-cooperation. So if you remember the date, First World War, 1914 to 1918 was your First World War. Okay, now you'll be reading Khilafat movement. Abhi Khilafat, the word Khilaf means going against, and non-cooperation. Cooperation means to help, and non-cooperation means withdrawal of the help. हम आप इंडिया में हैं, बहुत थोड़े ब्रिटिशर्स आए थे, ऐसे नहीं थे कि पूरा ब्रिटेन इंडिया आ चुका था, बहुत थोड़े ब्रिटिशर्स इंडिया आए थे, बट दे वर एबल टू रूल अस बिकॉज वी वर हेल्पिंग देम इन सम और द अदर वेज. ठीक है, या तो हम उनके वॉशरमैन, कॉबलर्स, डॉक्टर्स, ये सब इंडियंस होते थे. सो सिंस वी यूज्ड टू हेल्प देम दे वर एबल टू रूल. सो व्हाट वाज डिसाइडेड दैट हम खिलाफ जाएंगे, खिलाफत मूवमेंट विल गो अगेंस्ट देम, एंड नॉन कोऑपरेशन दैट मीन्स विल नॉट कोऑपरेट विद British. Now let us see. In year after 1919, we see the national movement spread to new areas, incorporating new social groups and developing new modes of struggle. How do you understand these development? What implications did they have? So after 1919, I've already said you in 1919 the Jallianwala Bagh incidents took place, which moved the entire world. पूरे वर्ल्ड को इस इंसिडेंट्स ने मूव कर दिया था, और ब्रिटिश की रियल फेस जो थी वो वर्ल्ड वाइड लोगों को समझ आ चुकी थी. सो आफ्टर 1919 न्यू ग्रुप्स, जो नए लोग थे जो अभी तक पार्ट नहीं थे स्ट्रगल के, इवन दे स्टार्टेड ज्वाइनिंग. First of all, the war created a new economic and political situation. It led to a huge increase in defense expenditure, which was financed by war loans and increasing taxes. Customs duties were raised, and income taxes introduced. So now what happened after the war or during the war? I've always said you, war is not only loss of life but as well as property. अगर कोई country war में जाती है, they have to spend lots of money on their arms and ammunition. Okay, so same happened. These Britishers were involved in the First World War. India was not a part of First World War directly, but indirectly, because India was a British colony. Okay, and other parts were under other European control. So India was indirectly involved in the war. और ये लोग क्या करते थे, जब वॉर की एक्सपेंस बढ़ी, जब वॉर लड़ने लगे और बहुत पैसे लगने लगे वॉर में, दे स्टार्टेड टेकिंग दैट मनी फ्रॉम द कॉलोनीज. जहां जहां इनकी कॉलोनीज थी, जैसे इंडिया, वियतनाम, ये सब कॉलोनीज जो थी, वहां से ये पैसे लेना स्टार्ट कर दिए. ठीक है, नए टैक्सेस इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिए, जैसे इनकम टैक्स उन्होंने इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया. Though the war year prices increased, doubling between 1913 to 1918, leading to extreme hardship for the common people. So prices of the things increased. जो common use की चीजें थी, उनकी price increase कर गई. So it became very difficult for common people, or you can say at that time, common people in India were the peasants, artisans, poor people. So it became very impossible for them to sustain their life, leading to extreme hardship for the common people. Villages were called upon to supply soldiers, and forced recruitment in rural areas caused widespread anger. So forced recruitment started. जबरदस्ती लोगों को वो आर्मी में इन्वॉल्व करने लगे, because during the war lots of army soldiers are required. और फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर में ब्रिटिश के तरफ से बहुत सारे इंडियन सोल्जर्स लड़ रहे थे. ओके, सो इट क्रिएटेड सिचुएशन जहां फोर्स रिक्रूटमेंट स्टार्ट हो गया, जबरदस्ती लोगों को मिलिट्री में वो ले जाने लगे. ये सारी सिचुएशन जो थी विलेजेस में, अब हमारे कंट्री में इंडियन फोर्सेस में जाना बहुत ही इजी टास्क होता है, बट एट दैट टाइम पेरेंट्स दे फियर सेंडिंग देयर किड्स बिकॉज दे फेल्ट कि अगर मर जाएगा, अगर कोई डेथ हो जाएगी, कोई कैजुअलिटी हो जाएगी, व्हाट हाउ विल दे लीड देयर लाइफ. सो नाउ सो एट दैट टाइम इट caused widespread anger. Then in 1918 to 1919 and 1920 to 1921, crops failed in many parts of India, resulting in acute shortage of food. This was accompanied by an influenza epidemic. So in 1919 to 1920 and 1920 to 1921, so 18 to 19 and 20 to 21, क्रॉप्स फेल हो जाती हैं. दैट मीन्स अब खाने को कुछ नहीं है. एंड डेफिनेटली व्हेन फार्मर्स डू नॉट हैव सरप्लस टू सेल इन द मार्केट और दे डू नॉट हैव टू कंज्यूम, दैट विल लीड टू शॉर्टेज ऑफ फूड. और उसी समय एक एपिडेमिक, इन्फ्लुएंजा इज अ डिजीज, इन्फ्लुएंजा एक एपिडेमिक आ जाती है. दैट मीन्स लोगों के पास खाने को भी नहीं है, एंड अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट दे हैव टू स्पेंड मनी ऑन health care as well. According to the census of 1921, 12 to 13 million people perished as a result of famine and epidemic. So 12 to 13 million people, they lost their life. कुछ बीमारी की वजह से, इन्फ्लुएंजा की वजह से, और कुछ फूड शॉर्टेज की वजह से. फेमिन इज अ सिचुएशन जहां पे शॉर्टेज ऑफ फूड एंड वाटर हो जाती है, लोगों को खाने को नहीं मिलता है. ओके, सो देयर वर 12 to 13 million people who lost their life. So imagine Britishers were controlling the entire economy, but they never paid interest in providing any help to such people. People hoped that their hardship would end after the war. War was over, but that did not happen. So people, they started feeling कि ठीक है, एक बार war खत्म हो जाएगी तो first world war खत्म हो जाएगी, then their hardship will end. But this did not happen. Okay, their condition remained same even after the war. At this stage, a new leader appeared and suggested a new mode of struggle. So at this stage, जब पूरी इंडिया में लोग बिना खाने का कुछ नहीं था, they had no food to eat, they had no money to spend on health care. At that time, a new leader appeared who taught people, or who suggested people a new mode of struggle. And who was that new leader? Who was none other than Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi appeared and he suggested a new mode. And what was that new mode? Satyagraha. Okay, so in the next video we'll be dealing about the ideas of Satyagraha. Satyagraha क्या है? सत्य आग्रह, सत्य के लिए आग्रह. When you follow a non-violent method and request people with truth. ठीक है, आप एक ऐसे मोड में आ जाते हैं जहां पे आप रिवोल्ट नहीं करते हैं, आप लड़ाई नहीं करते हैं, आप चुपचाप बैठ के अपने पॉइंट्स को पुट अप करते हैं. सत्य के लिए, सत्य से आग्रह, सत्याग्रह. सो ही स्टार्टेड विद अ न्यू मोड. दैट वाज द आइडिया ऑफ सत्याग्रह. इफ यू नो, बिफोर दैट ही हैड ऑलरेडी डन दिस इन साउथ अफ्रीका, okay, against the apartheid. If you remember that Mahatma Gandhi was thrown out of the running train because he was sitting on the first class. He was sitting in the first class compartment, and at that time it was believed that first class was reserved for the fair people, white skinned people. So since, despite having the ticket, he was asked to leave, but when he did not leave, he was thrown out of the running train. Okay, so he had already practiced it in South Africa, and when he came to India, he taught people this new mode of struggle, that now onwards we'll be doing Satyagraha. So basically, if you see, in 1915, India, Mahatma Gandhi has come to India, and after that, every year you will see something new. Like in 1916 was your Champaran Satyagraha, then your Ahmedabad, Kheda, then your non-cooperation, civil disobedience. Okay, he also helped in Khilafat movement. So there were many incidences that took place that we are going to read in the next video. Okay, and now what you have to do is, all these things are present over here, force recruitment and all this, what all you have read today regarding First World War, Khilafat and non-cooperation, all the bit that you have read, you have to do it in the form of definitions you will be writing. Once you get back your copies, you can jot down all these things, because now repeatedly we are going to submit the copies, so it's better that you write the things and keep, so that it does not get piled on. Okay, thank you so much.